Hey there, thanks for listening in and welcome to another Ellipsis Drive podcast. Here we dive into the stories of people, companies and technologies that transform and empower spatial data-driven industries. My name is Rosalie van der Maas, and today we have Joe Sexton with us, calling in from the United States. Joe here is co-founder and chief scientist of terraPulse Inc. and co-founder and president of NomadIQ. Joe, welcome.
Thanks, Rose. Glad to be here.
It's my pleasure. So what else should our listeners know about you before we dive into your story?
Oh, that's a trick question. How much time do I have?
Half a
So,
minute.
so I'm actually, before I was a data scientist, I was an ecologist, bachelor's, master's, PhD, all through sort of the academic route, everything from biodiversity and wildlife to forestry, forest dynamics and fire. But I just got into satellite imagery pretty early, in a fire ecology internship in the Panhandle of Florida. Saw my first satellite image, saw my first GPS unit, and saw my first GIS, ArcView 3.2, and went back into my department chair in the forestry department and told him, I think this is where it's going to go. And he basically said, well, not in your degree. So I dropped the degree and I went over to geography, and that's kind of where it all started. And then from there, it was Florida to Utah to North Carolina to a postdoc at NASA, professorship at the University of Maryland, and then starting terraPulse.
All right. So I don't blame you for not being able to fit that into 30 seconds. That's
Yeah.
fair. All right, great. So speaking of terraPulse, so I know that I've done my research and I know that terraPulse is an established remote sensing company and a cloud-based data provider to, correct me if I'm wrong here, agencies, nonprofits, universities, and businesses. Well, NomadIQ is like a mobile app. So
Right.
what's the relationship between these two?
So I'll back up a little bit and then hit it with a little bit of speed.
Mhm.
So terraPulse started as a research lab at the University of Maryland called the Global Land Cover Facility. It was the lab that spearheaded the open data movement for Landsat. I say they because I wasn't there yet. Saurabh Chana, my CEO at terraPulse, had been there since I believe 1999. When I was out discovering my first satellite image, Saurabh was spearheading the open data movement for them. So in 2009, Landsat becomes free, right? So what had previously been thousands of dollars and then dropped to hundreds of dollars was now free, kind of like the time zero watershed moment for our field. And the lab with NASA got a grant to build the world's first global deforestation data set, forest cover data set. The question was, how much forest is there on Earth, right? And we had political answers, but we didn't have data measurement answers, because forest can be a political definition as well. So we built that world's first data set in 2013. And then Saurabh and Min and I, Min's the chief technology officer for terraPulse, started terraPulse the year after. That was 2013 for the data, 2014 for the company, because one, NASA doesn't like to do things twice. They're an exploration agency. And so we knew that the world kind of needs this information, but they don't. I was going to conferences explaining to people that you can do math on maps. Maps are numbers. And so we started terraPulse to sort of pound the pavement and get this data, like keep doing science. I mean, most of what I do is science research projects, but get it out into the nonprofits, the land management agencies, the conservation agencies, and start answering the questions that are more applied, right? And so now that's what we do. We have biomass data sets, we have wildfire data sets, dynamic species distribution models for habitat mapping. And our clientele are big institutions. Science is very good at big institutions. But here's the relationship. So I, as a data scientist, in my heart, a field-based ecologist who's just curious, I want my data in my hand all the time. I want it. So when I go on vacation, I went to Mongolia last year and I was showing the southern margin of the boreal forest in Mongolia to reindeer herders on my mobile phone. And I want it at conferences, right? So when I meet somebody, science works as a network. It is not, we're not taking raw materials and moving it through a chain and eventually we end up with heat and garbage. The information gets better and better the more times it's shared and the more times it's used. So Nomadic is two things to me. It is one, it is a data scientist being able to have his data in his hand wherever he goes so that he can check it, right? If I see a white-tailed deer, I want to know if my map predicted that white-tailed deer would be there. If I see a weird, strange, recent gap in tree canopy cover, I want to be able to check it. So boots on the ground, putting data in your hand when your boots are on the ground. And then two, at conferences, I want to be able to share my data with the other data scientists and see what they're creating. Right. So it's basically building the feedback between reality and data, and then building the feedback from scientist to scientist. So that's what I
understand that. Yeah, and I quite like what you said about the more data gets used, the better it gets. Because it's a nugget of wisdom that people know is true for like applications for your mobile phone or software anywhere else. Like the more an application is used, the better it gets. But that realization doesn't always exist for data. Like the more data is shared and the more it is used, the better it tends to become. So yeah.
like the early books on like network graph theory, right? So preferential attachment, right? So the early internet companies, so actually which a lot of which are dead now, but they got big because they got used. It's not about holding, it's about throughput, right? So you like more nodes get attached to a node, the more nodes are attached to the node at time -1, right? So just get it flowing, get it moving. And the ellipsis drive, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, if not high priestess, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, so is it fair to say that NomadIQ does that for terraPulse? Or does NomadIQ do that for a broader base of data than just terraPulse?
Oh yeah, it does it for terraPulse primarily. So the first user of Nomadic, sorry, it's some we're still trying to decide if it's NomadIQ or Nomadic. But see, that's sort of the poetry in the name, a little bit of ambiguity. I call it Nomadic because that's how I use it. The first user is me at terraPulse, but we also have other users in there. We have the Oak Ridge National Labs Landscan dataset, for example. We have Colorado School of Mines has the NASA NOAA VEERS nighttime lights dataset on there, right? So, and I use these things. When I was in Mongolia, I used both of those. Like I'm in Ulaanbaatar. Okay, this has a very different topology as a city than anything I'm used to. Let me see what it looks like, right? And from that, I move on and I pan up the map and I realize, oh, like actually the biggest source of lights in that annual data set are wildfires in Siberia. More light is being emitted from, at least in a moment, from those wildfires than the cities. They're bigger, right? So the snowball is just on its first couple turns, and I'm the first. But yeah, we're adding data sets. And that's a big reason of how we use Ellipsis.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I understand that the vision of Nomadic or NomadIQ, whichever way you choose to go, is indeed to make sure that data is in your hand all the time and that it gets seen and that it gets used. So it's about mass collaboration for like data scientists like you, business leaders, I suppose, and the general public, including herders in Mongolia. So indeed, what sort of maybe not predominantly those, but apparently they're included. Um, but indeed, what are the infrastructural challenges that you face with a mission like that, especially because you're dealing with complex spatial data?
Yeah. So let's just say 2009 is time zero for our industry. That's not true, right? There have been commercial satellite imaging companies for a much longer, but that's at least an inflection point that we can start at. History always has prehistory. We're new. We're young, right? The biggest problem is not technological right now. It is societal, but the technology can solve that. So our biggest problem is discovery. So just how I can accidentally discover the size, the magnitude of wildfires in Siberia, and then notice that there's a data set that represents that. And then, by the way, Nomadic actually points, unlike sort of a recreational app, normal commercial recreational app that takes a data set and then calls it their own. Nomadic points the user to the lab that created it. That's very, very important, right? We're kind of exchanging attention for credit. So yeah, the problem is discovery. There's much more unrealized potential in this market at present than realized, which is a beautiful place to be. I would not want to be in any industry that is not in this position, right? I draw a lot of my parallels to forest ecology, forest succession. We are right now in the very high growth, the ascending arm, the hockey stick of this ecosystem. And we just need to get this awareness of our data sets out to more people. That's it, right? And the seeds are in the field, the ground is fertile, it's just more rain. So I'm rain dancing.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, and I get what you're saying that, the challenges are more societal than anything. And indeed, like the technical components are there, but they're ours to put together and indeed make sure to make it rain and foster that landscape. Do you see any additional agency that you have or that your team has or that perhaps the ecosystem that you work with has to further promote that, to make that hockey stick, yeah, go faster?
Well, yeah, and so there is a difference between between terraPulse and I don't know everyone else, right? There are a ton. I meet at AGU, the American Geophysical Union Conference, Ecological Society of America, like all these conferences. There are a ton of postdocs and young research professors who I really like. I feel like those are my community that are creating amazing data sets. terraPulse has the infrastructure, the cloud, also this is all thanks to AWS and Google Cloud and Microsoft, right? Like the big cloud providers are beneath all of this. terraPulse has the infrastructure to build data sets, design data sets. I collaboratively work with World Bank and IUCN and World Wildlife Fund and Island Conservation, a lot of big nonprofits, government agencies, USGS, EPA, come to us for maps, but not everybody does, right? So in order for terraPulse to do better, to do more good in the world, those agencies need to see the breadth of data that's coming out, right? It's a matter of familiarity. I made the fieldwork to remote sensing transition in 1998. Fieldwork does not scale. It's intensely valuable. Those data points that we collect when we're outside are byte for byte more valuable than any pixel, right? But they cannot do what remote sensing does. And the challenge that we often have is people want to use remote sensing like field data, right? And it's a different thing, right? It's a different thing. So what we need is familiarity. We need more people to see what this does and how to use it, and the tide will lift all the ships.
Yeah, and then
Also, say which ships are most seaworthy, right? Like we also need to get through that. There's a lot of stuff that people can start up a startup with a TED Talk, but the world needs to sort through the good data sets and the bad data sets. All that needs to happen faster. I'm becoming incredibly impatient.
yeah, and I guess it all boils back down to making the threshold of accessing those data sets, good and bad, as low as possible. And that's
Yeah.
where Nomadic comes in, and that's where I suppose Ellipsis Drive also sort of fulfills its role. So you mentioned that people come to you for maps, but do people also say like, well, I am one of those postdocs that has created a great data set. Can I publish my data on Nomadic? Is that something that you also support?
Occasionally, and just this year, in the US, a lot of people are looking for alternative ways to do their science or to publish their science or to, just to sort of show the value of this to the American people and to the world. People do come to us, and we've started. It's all very small, independent, kind of like postdoc level, right? These are not the tenured professors. These are not the government agencies. These are the young ones, right? And I like maybe I have not matured since I was one of them, but like that's really where my sympathies lie, right? Being up against like very powerful, very competent incumbents, and having something that is brand new and like how do you get it out there? And meanwhile, our as scientists, for a very long time, are really our overwhelmingly predominant vehicle of publishing science. The scientific product is the peer-reviewed paper, right? That's antiquated. That needs to be disrupted because the thing that is more valuable and more understandable often to more people are the data sets. Now, not every science has the benefit of where we stand in the geospatial industry. We make maps, right? Some of the oldest cave drawings in the world are maps. As Homo sapiens, we got this. We know how to read these publications, right? You don't need a PhD to read a heat map. Somebody needs to tell you once, red is more, blue is less, and you got it. You can find deer, right? You can find biomass. You can find houses that have wildfire risk and need to be reduced, right? This is the more liquid form of scientific publication. Yet, just because of inertia, we publish papers, which is, I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but I'm saying now we have an and. Mm-hmm. And so it's a growth opportunity.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of momentum there to not just publish papers, but to also create reusable data sets or reusable processes to create those data sets in the first place. And I know that a lot of like providers of funds to universities, to research institutes, like them to sort of publish data in compliance with like the FAIR principles as they're called. Yep. But we indeed still see, and myself as well, that like the primary incentives within science will always be to publish papers. So it's a bit of a struggle uphill, I would say, but yeah, it's definitely worth it, and it's great to see that you're in that fight.
Yeah, so hit the postdocs, right? The like the tenured professors, they have an awareness. They know that this needs to change, but the hungry ones, the really truly like hungry driven ones, with a motivation to change the system, are those postdocs, the postdocs and the non-tenure track professors. I work with a lot of tenured professors, and we publish a lot of amazing papers. Is the boreal forest moving north? Are droughts affecting mountain lion behavior? Right? Like just like amazing research, but we also publish these. We make these data sets publicly available, right? And we put them on repositories. Dryad is amazing. The distributed active archive centers of USGS are amazing. Like they're great resources. There's no doubt about it. The next step, because how deep do you want to go on this conversation? Because there's a growing rift between science and large institutions and the general public, right? If we as scientists find a more direct way to empower the general public, then the general public will, whether they are aware of it or just intuit it, the value of science, whether monetarily or emotionally or whatever, just trust will go up, right? So, and that's kind of the moonshot, right? terraPulse, we make data sets that can change the world, and we are delivering them to the large institutions. There are a lot of people out there that can directly benefit, and so that's the big gamble. And yeah, it's not just terraPulse. Like I use terraPulse. Like that's the example that I know best, and inside and out, and we create amazing things. But there are a lot of us out there.
Yeah, change the world, close the rift. I
Yeah.
like that. So, to make this picture a bit more concrete, can you take us through like a nomadic use case and sort of explain the workflow from start to finish, just with the app?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll do the ellipsis drive method. So I hear about a data set, right? So I'm on LinkedIn all the time. Like, basically we all live on social media, and our networks are our peers, and my peers are creating data. So I hear about something, right? Okay. I grab it. I find out the way to download it. I download it to my laptop, and I upload it to Ellipsis Drive. It cycles through, and I open it in the map viewer and start messing with the styling. We talk about systematic and unsystematic root mean squared error, and we talk about R squares. We talk about a lot of statistics, but before that, and even before the scatter plot, the density plot, uh, we fall in love with our eyes. We build that trust through our eyes and the numbers. And this is a very different story from me at 22 years old, right? 22, it was numbers, numbers, numbers. And I guess you build up enough intuition, you can kind of like, you can tell if something's good. So play with the styling, get a style that I like, a color map that I like in Ellipsis, and then activate it. We're currently using the WMS endpoint, and we're trying out the XYZ tiles as well on Ellipsis. Then Nomadic has a content management system of our own. So we enter it into content management system, and that links the API access to the user in Nomadic. So that Nomadic is a single user to Ellipsis Drive, and it's a many to one connection. And then we actually have to go through review of each layer in the Google and the Apple app stores. So each one of those is a subscription. It's voluntary. So payments to into Nomadic are voluntary. There's a button on the screen that says support. Right. You can still look at the map. You can get the data. You can get the information. If you want to pay, then that helps us pay our bills. And then, yeah, then the actual use of it is like if I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning with a burning question about the population density versus nighttime lights of North versus South Korea, or I want to see what terraPulse's tree, or even better, the wildfire data set, the biomass data set, or the dynamic mule deer habitat data set say about some location I heard about. I just pan and zoom, right? I don't have to go to my laptop. I don't have to go to my desk. I live in DC, traffic's terrible, right? Now imagine like having Google Maps instead of just having a road map. You've got population density and land cover and all these other entertaining things. If you're sitting in the passenger seat, you shouldn't be doing this while you're driving. But it's roadside entertainment for me. I put it on everything.
So that's the journey from data on the desk of a postdoc, so to speak, into the palm of your hand.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great.
And then actually, I'll tell you that the final use, we just added this feature because it is a network activity. When I'm at a conference and somebody says, what do you do? I used to go into this long, frankly boring explanation of I take satellite imagery, I apply artificial intelligence and machine learning and extract actionable information from those data, and I make geospatial data sets and I transmit it via API. Now I just say, do you have an iPhone, or do you have AirDrop, or and I just AirDrop a link to that data set to that person's phone, and now they see my products, right? I'm not telling them about process. I'm not telling them about all these things. And it just goes, it's a much more liquid, much more efficient vehicle of communication.
Yeah, that's super powerful. And
Yeah.
indeed, I can imagine that happening a lot at conferences. And then you having very interesting conversations around that too. That's refreshing.
You should see me at Christmas dinner.
Or as a passenger in a car.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm insufferable.
I doubt that. But hey, so some closing thoughts, considering the time. What are Nomadic's key deliverables for 2025, if there are any?
Well, we're not really at a stage with key deliverables yet. It's kind of a passion project of a group of friends that are all working on it. But what I can say is um, more data, more data layers. I'm a terribly greedy person when it comes to cool data sets. So I'll be putting as many data sets as I can find on there. If anybody else wants to put data on, we'll put it on Ellipsis, hook it up to Nomadic, get it on there. Um, More features we're working on. I try not to tip my hand because we're working on offline data access, more useful to field workers. It works great where I've got cell phone access now. We'd like to have it out in the field with us and more users. We've got an internship or an intern, Harris Suleiman from the University of Maryland Business School with an impact fellowship to work with us for the summer for marketing. Right, like this is not just a technology problem. This is not just a science problem. This is also a marketing problem. So that's not me, right? Don't put the scientist on that job. Let's go to the business school and get a hired gun.
Makes sense. Makes sense. It's a good collaboration to kick up. So with that, it is time to wrap up, unfortunately. So on behalf of our listeners, thank you so much for sharing your story today. And if you're tuning in and you'd like to know more about Joe, about Nomadic, about terraPulse, we'll leave some links in the description so you can find everything that you're looking for. For now, thanks for being with us today, and on to the next one.
Thank you.